We're taking an in-depth look at the ban on diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts on Texas college campuses.
It's a hot topic, and a controversial Texas law is now on the books for less than 3 weeks.
When DEI is under attack, what do? Stand up, fight back.
Those are jobs that should have never existed. That is ideological warfare that should have never happened in college campuses.
None of us really understand why the bill was passed, what it was really supposed to do, why it was necessary, and everybody's just kind of in a state of limbo.
In the past few years, colleges put in place programs and offices to recruit and welcome people of color to campus. However, critics argue they exclude white, Jewish, and Asian students in the process. Texas lawmakers passed Senate Bill 17 last year, and today we now know people on both sides of this issue will watch how universities implement the new law. It stops public universities in Texas from having an Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion and prevents them from hiring or assigning officers, employees, or contractors to performing those duties. This recently was in the spotlight in a high-profile congressional hearing after presidents at certain universities gave unclear answers on keeping Jewish students free from harassments. The presidents of Harvard and the University of Pennsylvania resigned. It sparked major donors to rethink donations to the schools. And that's where we started our conversation this week with a supporter of the new Texas law.
In the weeks ahead, the conservative think tank, the Texas Public Policy Foundation, will roll out a tip line for people to report violations of the DEI ban. We spoke with senior fellow Sherry Sylvester.
The Ivy League professors, 1 billion people watched that testimony. It was the highest viewership for congressional testimony that we've ever seen. And it exposed a lot of things that we are seeing in Texas. We think about so-called diversity, equity, and inclusion as small programs. But what we've learned is that it's actually an ideology that infuses every area of the campus, big administrative bloat, and so the kinds of answers that you heard those Ivy League presidents proclaim, the insensitive and anti-Semitic answers, are the kinds of things that we've heard out of professors at the University of Texas, for example. One DEI professor said, in a system of oppression, meaning this university, you're either an oppressor or a revolutionary.
I think what we've seen so far from the universities either have been kind of closing down certain offices or renaming offices, or they've been somewhat publicly saying we're going to do similar things just in different departments throughout campus. What are your thoughts on that?
That's what we're seeing. We're seeing some universities, Texas Tech University, San Jacinto University, they closed their DEI offices down. That's done. The people who work there are still there, but they're not working there. At the University of North Texas, they established a new Center for Belonging and Engagement. Now, I don't know what that means. I'm not sure when you have students coming from all over the state and the country that anyone walks into college and feels like they belong. But I think part of the confusion, Phil, is that people believe that these DEI programs have to do with minority recruitment or civil rights. But what we've seen, the biggest indictment against them is not ideology. They have not improved student outcomes for any students, and they've been in Texas campuses 10 or 15 years. They've not increased the number of minorities who've enrolled at Texas campuses, and they've not increased diversity on Texas faculties, even though you had to, before we passed this law, sign a statement pledging that you adhere to DEI. So the biggest indictment against DEI for people who care about minority or marginalized kids is that it doesn't work.
Our efforts to have more minorities on college campuses, to have all students feel comfortable on campus, to have a diverse faculty, are they worthy goals? Do you agree with that? And if so, how do we get there?
Absolutely, Gromer. Everybody wants that. And one of the things that's most tragic in this process is that half, we've got our 10% rule in Texas. Half the kids in the 10% are African American or Hispanic, and they're not going to college at all. And that has a lot to do with finance and a lot to do with preparation. But our goal is that every Texan, any Texas kid that wants to go and is prepared to go can go. And we've got other movements to make sure that kids are prepared to go. But of course, that's always been the goal. And that's why DEI is so disappointing, because the numbers remain small. At A&M in 2015, they asked the African American students at A&M if they felt like they belonged. And 80% said they felt like they belonged. So that's not great, but it's 80%. By 2021, after their big DEI plan, that had dropped to 55%. And that's because the ideology is so divisive.